Ko naman te mau en jotak. Kanaysa dinewethe. Mo ikene onia. O mat nomene a town. O mat nomene kihe nom pisuk. No itau tomau Phoenix, Arizona. Neo Mandy anewethet. Nui mawawa nokwe mo ikene o kwao nguk. Mawawa nokwe anewethet. Nochnat, o mat nomene awe, Marvin weso. None chane, niswa blankwe, wankwa pikwan, ane we techek. No takothe, ayo onewe. I said my name is Kanaysa. I am Mohican and Menominee from Menominee land. I have a Menominee father. His name was Marvin. My mother is Mohican. Her name is Leah. I have two daughters, Tyria and Emerald, and I'm happy and grateful to be here. Onewe, wawanan. We're here today to talk to you about where we see the language in 50 years and how it is essential for it to be spoken in the home if it is where we think it's going to be in 50 years. But first I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I was born on Menominee land to a Mohican mother and a Menominee father in Wisconsin, aka Wiscosik. I had three older sisters growing up, which was pretty cool, I guess. I don't know. They were like spaced out perfectly every 2 years, and then I came in 8 years later to crash the party, and they acted like I wasn't an accident, you know. So, but it was good having the older sister to lean on growing up, you know. Like I didn't have my languages growing up, you know. It was all English all the time. I like to say I went to English immersion school growing up because that's what the public school system is, you know. My grandmothers were both boarding school survivors, and my grandfathers, they both died before I was born. I don't really know a lot about them, you know. It was pretty colonized, no stories, no teachings, no language, none of that stuff, you know. So, yeah, both my mom and my dad went to Christian church growing up. One Catholic, one Lutheran. My mom was Lutheran, and I was in line to do the same thing, go to Lutheran church, you know, when I was going to get confirmed or whatever it is to become an official member. And I went to about 3 or 4 classes, and I realized, you know, I don't know if it's my spirit rejecting it or just a little res kid in me that didn't want to do it, but I asked my mom if I could stop going, and she surprisingly said yes. And I was like, you know, I was like, had all these excuses saying, well, this, and this, and she said yes right away. So I was really surprised, and that really affected me even to this day. That was kind of the beginning of me decolonizing. You know, I didn't realize it then, but we were they had this big institution that everybody, you know, kind of worshiped. They had a stranglehold on everything, even our little community. And my mom was allowing me to walk away and let that go and just kind of let it crumble, and slowly but surely it'll fade out of our lives, you know. So I started going to powwows. I started dancing, you know, leaning into my culture, but it was all without the language. I think that made a difference because eventually school and sports did the job that the church couldn't, and I was colonized. I went to college, got married, had a family, not necessarily in that order, but yeah, I graduated, moved far away from home, was gonna make a life of my own, you know, and that was probably the worst thing I could have done for my daughter's identities, their indigenous identities, you know, not to mention mine. But, you know, I was trying to live that colonizer dream, you know, just making money, keeping up with the Joneses, but I always had this itch, you know. I think it started with Nachethum Pawasin, my little brother Pawasin. His mom is my mom's sister, so in the Mohican way, you know, she's also my mom, Guk Malish, you know. She's been a huge inspiration on me. She's been studying language as far as I can remember. You know, when I was a little kid, her son Pawasin would say these Muncie words, and I was just like, whoa, what is that, you know? And he's like, yeah, we got this sound. I'm like, what? We talk like that? And he's like, yeah. I was like, damn. So that was all I needed to hear, you know. I was studying out of one of these big old dictionaries, just, you know, self-studying. I didn't become a speaker or anything, but it kept that itch alive, you know. It kept that connection to my native identity, you know. You know, I was scratching that itch, you know, once in a while, sometimes for a month straight, sometimes not for a few years, you know, or a few months. And then COVID happens, you know, life goes on, stuff happens. We have these shutdowns, and I love the shutdowns because I hated my job, and I was over it. By the end of 2020, we had more shutdowns, and I was realizing that I didn't like my job. So by early 2021, I left, and you know, I had all this free time, and language literally fell into my lap. At first, it was Menominee language, Omatnomene Wakeness, and these couple of old friends at Menominee U and from back home started Menominee U. It's a nonprofit organization that just teaches Omatnomene Wakeness, and my daughter came running over to me one day. I was kind of self-studying some of their TPR videos. They do a really good job with their TPR videos, actually. And I was learning pretty well, and I was probably doing it for a couple months. My daughter comes running over, and she was going to show me something. The phone drops in my lap. So language literally fell in my lap. It was a digital flyer from Menominee Youth. They were doing 100% online classes, due to COVID. And so me being in Phoenix, my people being back in Wisconsin, I jumped at that chance, So that was going pretty well. I was in good pace. I was learning with my daughter and my sister. I was going really well. I was about 2 months into that, and then Nate Tuckgun, my brother Joe, another one of my mom's sister's kids, calls me up and he goes, "Hey, you want to learn Mohican?" I'm like, thought it was extinct, He goes, "No, we're bringing it back." I'm like, "For real?" I was like, "For real?" I was like, all the excuses start going through my head. Well, I'm learning Menominee. I know if I have enough time. I still didn't have a job at that point, just making all these excuses. And I think at some point, maybe my ancestors got a hold of me and started shaking me up a little bit because, it wasn't like, I just said yes with all my being, it wasn't like I gave in. I was like, what am I doing? Yeah, let's do this. And that's when I first met Chris and reconnect with Brock. I knew him since he was a little tyke, and they've laid a great path for me. Without them, this compared to my self-study and everything else I've been doing, just blows it out of the water. We've been meeting 3 times a week, as many as 8 hours a day, or 8 hours a week, I'm sorry. And it's just a really fast pace, and without these guys, I wouldn't be where I am, just with this language journey. It's just, probably one of the most difficult, fun, worthwhile things, I've ever done, most loving. And it's just, I feel like this is right where I'm supposed to be, But we're here to talk about where we see the language in 50 years. And for me, I see Munsee, Mohican, Menominee all being spoken. We're in a pretty close geographic area. When the Mohicans and Munsees came from the Mohicanatuck, what we call the Hudson River today, all the way out to Wisconsin, we didn't have a place to stay. And my dad's people, the Menominee, gifted my mom's people, the Mohicans, part of their reservation, so we would have a reservation of our own, and we've been kind of co-mingling ever since. But it is essential for us to speak the language in the home if we are going to see Mohican, Munsee, and Menominee all spoken like that. So, language in the home. How does that work for me, an empty nester whose wife travels for work, My eldest daughter, she is in medical school in her first year. My youngest daughter, she's in her final year of her undergrad. She'll be student teaching in the spring. She's going to be a teacher. And great humans, love them. So grateful for them, but they don't live at home. So who do I talk to? I talk to my wife when she's there. She's not a speaker. She understands what I'm trying to do. She lets me go on and on. But I can talk to my dogs. They know katope. Katope? That means, are you hungry? So that's their favorite Mohican word. I talk to my cats. I give them cool Mohican nicknames, but you know how cats are. They just kind of do their own thing. I'll go outside. I'll talk to the birds and the trees and the rocks or whatever. But it's good to talk to them, but they don't talk back. So, who do I talk to? Well, I got to use the old Numnaken, and I text every day. So here's my method. I do daily text messages every day to my wife, well, that too, but Mohican text messages to my mom and my 2 daughters. And then I accompany that with a voice memo, because Mohican written down is just a rearrangement of colonizer letters. You got to hear the language, speak the language to, that's how these languages are meant to work. And then I include an English translation, in parentheses where it belongs. But that's how my kids learn, and my mom. And they're showing progress, not a ton, but they're saying stuff in the language. They're greeting me in the language. Guapanachain, good morning, kunamonte, how are you? Kagwai ketanaka, what are you up to? That's happening. But the main thing for me and the easiest thing for me to see is the improved relationships. And I know you could say, well, yeah, you're texting your loved ones on a daily basis. Of course that's going to happen. And that's true, but when you do it in the language, there's a different feeling of love to it. There's a different connection. You want to keep doing it every day. That wasn't happening with English. Otherwise, I would have already been texting. My wife and my mom and my daughters in English every day, and that wasn't happening. So yeah, it's easy to see that my relationships are improved. I'm not saying my daughters are like, oh my God, you're the best dad ever or anything, but they're sharing details with me about their day, where they weren't doing that before. They used to go to their mom for everything, so once they left the house, they didn't really have anything to talk to me about. Man, that's kind of sad. But ever since I started texting with Mohican, our relationships are just way better. And stuff's happening every day, just with them telling me stuff and details about their day and just being more intimate with me. And it's happening with my mom too. We were talking the other day about love and gratitude, and that feeling of love and gratitude you get when it fills you up in the center of your chest, and I was telling her I've become more familiar with that feeling, and she said, me too, and she goes, and I gotta tell you, son, you texting me in the language every day is the biggest contributor to that feeling. Get that one in Dayon. I love you, my son. She said that last part in Mohican, or texted it, and that just melted my heart. It was filled me up with love and gratitude. That was, that's everything. That's everything that we want from this, just having these connections, speaking the language of our ancestors, every day, and that's happening for me. It feels like I'm on the right path. This is where I'm supposed to be, and I can sit up here all day and talk about my language journey, but how it gave me my identity back and how healing it is. But we all know that stuff, and we're here to talk about. Anyway, up next we have Chris, right?
Wow, that was fast.
Yeah.
Wel, bore da pawb. Dwi ddim yn siarad yn yr iaith Mohican, ond mae tradoriaeth gyda fi siarad I chi gyd yn yr iaith Cymraeg. I always speak Welsh when I come here, so I'll break away from Mohican for a second and give you a bit of a language near and dear to my heart. All right. Unit. Ana komayak natawe henech chek. The ones who are my relatives are the ones who are able to speak in the native language. So the native language being taught, used, and learned in the family is what I'd like to talk to you about for the next little bit. But before I begin, I'd like to give a quick tale about how we got to be speaking Mohican today. So no anachtheak, the language that's spoken now. A quick history of Mohican. In the 1700s, some Moravian and other Protestant missionaries wrote down a bunch of documentation. So we've got things like hymns and translations of Christian stories or prayers or that sort of thing. And we've got word lists. So somebody popped by a Mohican territory and said, how do you say this? How do you say that? And scrawled down a few words. So that's what exists today of the language from the 1700s. Zoom forward a century, and in the 1800s was the time of the continual removal of people west-west on their way to Wisconsin. And during that time, there was another big translation of a Protestant catechism, and more word lists were gathered. But by this time in the 1800s is when the intergenerational transmission of the language was starting to falter. An upheaval of an entire population is a traumatic time for all, and language is often one of the first aspects of life and culture to suffer. So by the time the 1900s arrived, we had the last speakers of Mohican who grew up speaking the language fluently. But at the same time, some early linguists popped by Mohican territory and recorded some more Mohican language in phonetic alphabet that we can read today. And then by 1920, 1930, the last fluent speakers were passing away. And after that were people who remembered some vocabulary and isolated words, and everything got silent. So a few examples of the source material that we've used to rebuild the Mohican language and be able to speak it again. This is an example of something from the Moravian documents in the 1700s. And we can pick out words in that sort of German-style handwriting, Nate Takanak, my older brothers. is the first line up there. In the 1800s, this is an example of the kind of word lists that exist. And in this, we've got the word skonkfith, which is where the English word skunk comes from. And so we can pull vocabulary out of these word lists as well. Up into the 1900s, this is an example of the kind of traditional stories that were recorded by, this is William Dick, one of the last fluent speakers of the language in the 30s. And they told these stories to linguists who then wrote them down in notebooks that were then microfilmed, stuck on a microfilm, and buried in a basement somewhere at the American Philosophical Society until we showed up and kind of dug them out again. But really, is the early 1900s the end of the language? Is it extinct? Is it gone forever? Well, come the 2000s, and we start having meetings in Mohican territory and asking people, do you remember anything at all? Do you remember anything about the language? And I was just thinking maybe they had a photograph with something written on the back or somebody's name or what have you. But people came forward, elders came forward and say, oh, I remember some words I heard when people visited my grandmother and grandfather's house. So I've got a couple audio examples.
Spockeye, meat rind.
That's Sheila Miller remembering the word for pork rinds, spockeye, which is literally pork skin.
You see, they say Damika. They say that's coming when they say that. But that's all I ever known.
Damika, come in the house.
Pichitapulam. So whatever those may mean, perhaps we can find out how the correct sound of them.
So John Williams remembered a phrase that people would say visiting the house, but never knew what it meant. But he remembered the sounds of it. And so many of the words that people remembered were visiting words. You hear a knock on the door. Demeka, matpe, have a seat. What would you like to eat? All these sorts of phrases are the ones that people remembered. So it was always social. The language was always in a social environment. And then come today, we've got every single phrase and word and sentence that we know about in the language, and we've put it all in a database so that we can see and hear and look at the sentences from the 1700s up until today. And so that's sort of the journey of the Mohican written and spoken word up until now, to the point where we just speak to each other in the language all the time. So it didn't go extinct. There were embers around that we could use the old documents to just sort of blow on those embers and get the language going again. So that's a quick review of how we rebuilt, or what we rebuilt the language from so that we can speak it. But I'd like to specifically talk about why we think teaching the language, or using the language would be a better term, using the language at home with the family. And so I did some looking at numbers and looking at graphs and tables and charts, and a couple things struck me. We have limited number of hours and minutes in the day to learn language, and we want to maximize all of those minutes and hours and seconds to speak the language to one another. So I thought, well, let's do a thought experiment, and let's see how much time we actually have during the day to do language stuff. So here's girls and boys, ages 15 to 17, a nice target group that we'd like to be able to provide even more language to. And what are they up to? Well, we can't do much with sleep. That's sort of the white pie piece at the bottom. If they're going to dream in the language, they're going to do that on their own. We can't feed language into that. or class time in school and homework, the dark gray and brown slices at the top right. You know, depending on your situation in your community, getting language in the school may not be an option. Certainly in Mohican territory, there is no school to have any kind of language program. So averaging the two groups together, oh, by the way, look at how much more screen time the boys spend than the girls. So the guys are glued to their phone more than the girls are, and the girls do a lot more, homework than the boys do. So the girls are doing their homework, and the guys are watching YouTube. So something to keep in mind. But let's average those out to overall teens' use of time. And I've separated out of the pie chart here potential targets of activities that we can add language to. So screen time, be that farting on the internet, texting your friends, watching YouTube videos, playing video games, all that stuff, we can add language into that fairly easily. Same with socializing and leisure. So socializing, hanging out with your friends or family, we can certainly add more language into that domain. Same with leisure activities, hobbies, sports, or eating. You know, mealtime might be the first and most obvious place to start bringing in the language when you're all sitting at the table. But why not when you're cooking? Why not when you're going shopping to pick up groceries? Why not when you go into the garden to pick carrots or what have you? These are all times when you and your children, your brothers and sisters are together and nobody's forcing you to speak English. So this is another great target that we can look at as a potential place to speak language. So adding all of these up, that gives us 7.6 hours per day that we can use language, potentially. And that's a lot. Imagine having 7.5 hours per day to learn, practice, and use your language. Even if we do half of that, that's almost 4 hours a day. Almost 4 hours, more than we're getting now. So if you have a language in the school program, we're not even including that. That's the gray and the brown pie slices. So this is an additional 3 hours and 50 minutes of language a day, which is more than I thought. I didn't think that we had this much time to bring language in. So that's fantastic. Very exciting. How am I doing? Am I okay? All right. Screen time. So let's take a couple sort of a zoom in to some of these pie slices and what we might be able to do with them. So screen time, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that was, we have to hire programmers and make a video game that'll only be playable once and people will get bored. And we had all these great ideas, but they were very hard to realize. Jump forward to today, and putting language on the screen is simple. So this is Minecraft. Anybody 20 years or younger will know what Minecraft is and will have played it. We had a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old create a Mohican language Minecraft world that learners can play in and interact with each other. And I asked my son, they're both my kids. I make them do this work. If you're a language person, have children so that you can get them to do your job for you. Yeah. So they put together this video of the world they created.
Kwechemo.go.
Naamaw. Kwechemo.
Machemo.
Koskos. Koskos.
Kwechemo.
Naamaw. Kwechemo.
So what you saw there were actual video games that they created. The first scene where it was sort of hovering over a village, the Mohican Cultural Department gave them sketches of what Mohican villages look like, and they created one. And that's sort of the home base where all of these activities occur. The next one you saw with the sort of Mesoamerican pyramids, that was a scavenger hunt game. So you have different teams and they run through there and they have to find certain objects. And when they find an object, let's say they find a shirt and they put it in their inventory, every time they throw a shirt at somebody, it says the name of the item. And the last one you saw with the animals, that was one where you had to go to by boat to a mysterious island with a bunch of little Minecraft leashes, and you had to go find animals, bring them to the boat, and bring them back. And again, you saw the animals talk back to the kids who were playing it. What they didn't show on there is also they developed esports, so competitive games where, let's say, Mohican kids play against Menominee kids, play against Ojibwe kids. They're all wearing headphones so they can speak to each other in the language so the other team can't understand. And so we're going to have esport competitions from community to community and have these kids play against each other, built by a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old. I mean, they're smart kids, right? But that's all it took. It just took an idea and a couple kids who knew how to do stuff in Minecraft, and now we got screen time in the language. Okay. Let's go to the next one. So eating was another example. And 5% of the day is spent eating. But more than just eating, it's preparation, right? Cooking the food, gathering the food together. It's eating together with your family, but inviting friends over, eating with them, going out to eat. And distribution at the bottom, one of Brock, the other presenter's activities, is they grow food and distribute it to people throughout the community. So he spent the last 2 weeks picking potatoes and is now delivering potatoes to everybody. Those are all things that can be done in the language. And we've just added 5% of the day, not learning the language as much as just using it and learning through use instead of learning through formal kind of educational activities. Okay. So that is the life of a teen, 15 to 17, and how we can add more language to their day. The next thing I looked at was for younger kids, and how much time do they spend with their parents? I believe yesterday there was a claim that mothers were better than fathers. An unsubstantiated claim yesterday, but we see that indeed mothers are better than fathers. Children under 6 get 4+ hours spent with their mom on average. 4 hours, and dads get 3. Come on, dads. 4 hours, 3 hours, 7 hours a day of interaction with a child. In the language, holy. 7 hours a day, that kid under 6 will be talking in no time. As they get older, to under 13 years, so the kid is now under 13 years old, the mother and father's time has dropped off a bit. The kid's more independent, doing their own thing. But that's still 3.5 hours of time spent with mom and 2 hours, 45 minutes with dad. And if mom and dad are speaking the language to that child, that's 6 hours a day of language instruction. So let's compare this to a really good language program. So I was looking around for various language immersion programs in the school system, and here's one example, sort of typical of what good language programs can be. This is in the city of Winnipeg, Manitoba. It's a Cree bilingual school program that's in one school for a city of 800,000 people. So you can imagine not everyone's going to live nearby. It's going to be difficult to get to, what have you. But they bus kids in. And it's kindergarten to grade 4. And half the day is in Cree, half the day is in English. So I think overall people would say that's a pretty good program. Not too bad. And interestingly, too, it mixes together kids who grew up in families where Cree is spoken and families where Cree is not spoken. And if we compare home to the immersion school, so the immersion school, the entire day is 5 hours. Half of that is immersion, which equals, over a 7-day week, 1 hour and 47 minutes per week of the best immersion school in town. And that's a blip compared to what the parents can add. So instead of the school being the teacher of the language to children, the school is supplementary to what the parents can bring at home. The school amount of time just isn't enough, I would think, compared to what families can bring. So the last thing I want to talk about, okay, good, are not times during the day, but maso tamake, successfully hitting things that you're aiming for. And so I pulled this quote from a paper. And it says, positive emotions increase learners' awareness of language input and accordingly promote their acquisition of in this case, a foreign language. Positive emotions improve their resilience and perseverance when facing language difficulties and intrinsically enhance the learner's motivation. Negative emotions, by contrast, inhibit language learning and interfere with second language development by increasing learners' affective filter and thus reducing their understanding and processing of language input, causing them to engage in avoidance behavior. Avoidance behavior means not speaking the language, either clamming up or switching to English in this context. So it seems natural. If you're having a good time and you have positive vibes, you're going to learn better and have a closer bond with the language than if you learn it in a negative context. So this is the jumping off point of the second thought experiment. So I read that and I think, all right, what things do people like to do? So I found a number of different surveys of self-reporting activities that people enjoy and what they don't enjoy. I liked this one because it gave lots of activities to look at. So this is, people were given a list of activities and they voted 1 to 7, or 1 to 10, 1 to 7, how much they enjoy the activity or how much they don't. So let's look at the things people hate to do the most. Homework, job hunting, house cleaning, commuting to work, working, and school. Those are the things that people voted were their least favorite things to do. And where do we bring language into young children's lives or people's lives in general? At work and at school. So I teach Mohican for employees of tribal employees. And geez, work. So they're having a miserable day at work because they have to put up with people like me. And now we got to do language lesson. They're not learning very well. based on the previous quote. So those are the ugly activities. The bad activities, well, mid-range, what do we have in here? In bed, not asleep. Looking after pets. A second job. Farting around on the internet. Eating at work. Those sorts of things. Mid-range. Okay, nothing too exciting for us there. But for the activities that people enjoy doing, what do we got? Hanging out with your kid, watching TV, so screen time, listening to music, physical activities, playing with child, going out to eat, sleep. If I zoom out, and I want to target language learning so people are learning it best, I want to avoid homework, domestic chores, school, and work. What I want to focus on are the fun things. Time spent with your kids, time with your friends, playing games, physical activity, and going out on the town. This is what people love to do. So let's put language into those activities where people are most willing to learn. And if we compare what's fun with our available time from the previous section, they line up. Right? Leisure time is a great place to bring in language because we have those hours of the day that we can do it, and people love leisure time. They love eating. They love farting on the internet. They love hanging out with their friends. So we have like a match, a perfect match, man. Family and friends gives you the best hours a day to learn the language and the best sort of mental attitude so that you can learn best. Onewe, thank you so much. I'll pass it over. Thanks. I'll pass it over to Brock here, and he'll give the third part for the next 20 minutes. Onit, Brock?
Ko naman te, kaputo eh.
Onit, okay. Kese nametank. Quoi?
Kwa, ka na me ma we.
Okay. Naka.
Ho naman te mo, ma we in Jothak. Brock Schreiber and Dinewefe. Nia ma ekeneo se kunek nom. Doko se tu wonko tom. Tandaeo no wonkamau. Gumawe wonkamau yaskam bachkenok. Patat ke organic. Hangap on a minitheak. Hangap wake o hak. My name is Brock Schreiber. I'm Mohican, and I live on the Mohican Reservation. We went into our Menominee brothers and sisters for allowing us to live here in this beautiful place. My language journey started pre-COVID, kind of by accident, I guess. My brother said, "Hey, come check this class out." I went and checked it out. First time I heard the language, I thought, "Oh man, this is beautiful. This is something I was missing. I didn't know I was missing, and I want to be a speaker." And I wanted to be a speaker because I wanted my children to have the opportunity to be speakers. So I started learning the language and never stopped. And this is something I didn't grow up with. This is something my father didn't grow up with. This is something my grandmother didn't grow up with. And, so not knowing that I was even missing it wasn't in our family for a while. And when I started learning language, I had 2 children. Now I have 3. And before my youngest was born, my wife and I decided that I would only speak in the language to him. Now he hears me speak English all the time, and he hears English all the time. He's 3 years old, but whenever I talk with him, I only speak in the language. And at first I thought, I don't know if this is even possible. How is this going to work out? But turns out making that decision is a good incentive to learn the language because I have to always be ahead of him and his ability to speak. And we had to work on ways, well, how do I use this language? You know, I wasn't sure if I would be, I guess, good enough that he would know how much I loved him. If I'd be the same father to him that I was to my daughter and my older son. But we worked on translating books. We worked on lullabies. Before he was even born, I was reading books and singing to him. And that was just a big motivation for me in wanting to learn the languages, to share it with my family in the house. And a lot of the things that I do, the decisions that I make really boil down to, is it good for my family? And if it is, then it's probably good for the community. So that's probably enough about me, I guess, at this point. I don't think I have too much time here. But so strategies for speaking in the house. So I want to first start with a video. So I'm going to share my screen here. And I'll start. Okay, I'm going to share this video.
Ask us why take Hakan. No. Unit. No. Wow, unit. Agora na kau na pena pato.
Yes, happen.
Wow, unit. Na pok to take Hakan. No. Oh, look at Pokto!
Noche,
Yeah.
móvete.
Gone, stop. Gone. Oh, no, come on, Ponka. Oh, yeah. Kapan na kau na pisquato? Oh, swing.
Staniasta. Kawai
Kapan na kau, Bryn?
Nia. Tao.
Mia, oh, stop. Got no.
Mito. Soketan.
No, ni swap cake na.
Nia.
Mbokte.
Kia. Nia asta.
Ask us why.
So that's my beautiful family there. So that game is called Who Farted? It's called Who Farted? And so I got this idea. Chris shared an article with me years ago, and it was of Donis Kennedy. She's an Ojibwe language instructor, and there's this article on her about this fart game that she was using to teach the language. And so I had the opportunity to talk with her and hear about the game. And I thought that's a really good idea. And so we started playing with just a regular deck of cards back home and back in the community. And we took a regular deck of cards. And the rule was if you get a heart, that means you farted. That meant you farted. And it was a really good way of teaching language without having to look at conjugation charts and having to go over grammar. That you could just play within these simple set of rules, and you can continue to advance with the language. So I'll share my screen again, and let me get into a little PowerPoint. So here's Donis Kennedy. And so we started off with just So we start off with this game, just regular cards. So here would be the example. We have these players get these cards. And player 1 would be the dealer and would ask, who farted? And then somebody would respond, oh, player 4 farted. We'd start the game like that. And the questions might start to advance. That asking, did you fart? Yes, I did fart, or no, I didn't fart. But I thought we could probably design something a little more specific and expand on the game. And so we came up with this idea, who farted. Let's just go over some of the nuts and bolts of this. Here is the progression of the card game. This is the card design. So we ended up putting QR codes on these cards. And we ended up getting rid of the animals, and we left it with just 2 characters, not introducing too much language at one time. But so we have a boy and a girl instead of having several different animals. So in the top right corner, if you scan this with your phone, it is going to, in the language, tell you the color of the card. And in the bottom left corner, it's going to tell you the verb, and in the bottom right, obviously, the number. And so besides being a game that's social that you can play, it's take-homeable. So when you get done playing this game, you can also take it home and you can study if you want to. But you can take this game, a family could have it and not have any knowledge of the language and start playing it. I think the most important thing that we've come across with kind of gamification and playing games, especially this farting game when you're talking about farting, is you can watch people's shoulders relax. You know, you can be sitting around a table and you can just watch, you know, especially adults, you can just watch their shoulders relax because they are kind of laughing and having fun, and it's not this sit down in the classroom type lesson. It's just playing a game. Especially when the first eruption of laughter, like particularly when you have like an auntie or a grandma and they got to say that they farted, you know, and when they laugh and everyone starts laughing, it's a pretty good experience. So more of the nuts and bolts of what's in the deck, we have emotion cards, and those are very useful because you talk about emotions every day. We have weather cards. Again, it's something that you can talk about every day. And then we have these action cards. And these cards were very practical that Chris suggested early on when I was learning the language to take a notebook around with me and just jot down things that I needed to know how to say, that I didn't know how to say. And then I came to the conclusion that in my house, these are very, very common words, and I figure, well, if it's common in my family, it's probably common in other people's family, you know, people with children, grandchildren. So we have all of these verbs. And then we have the infamous farting cards. Now they have different symbols on them because they represent different things for different games, but these are the funny ones. So you can just imagine what will happen when you scan that QR code. I could probably share this PowerPoint with anybody who's interested, but if you scan that QR code, you might hear something interesting. And then we also have different rule cards so different variations of the games you can play. Essentially, the Who Farted game. We have charades, memory, go fish, and crazy eights. And again, this is just what's included in the deck. So these are all the things that are included in that deck. And so this would be a typical hand, let's say. You know, so your questions could be very, very progressive. You can just start off with who farted. That's the base. That's where you start. That's first base. And when everyone gets comfortable with that, then you might ask, did you fart? And when people start getting comfortable with that, you know, we're already working on negative statements and positive statements. Yes, I did fart. No, I didn't. Now we can start asking about emotions. We can start asking what somebody's doing. We can ask if multiple people farted. We can ask what the weather is like, what the weather's like where somebody lives, what you'll be doing tomorrow. Did you fart yesterday? You know, and so we also have these colors. So if you have a certain color, what color is your shirt? You know, based on the color of card in your hand. How many apples did you eat today? How many apples do you want to eat tomorrow? You know, that's a question based on the number that's on your card. So there's so many variations, and it's just you're just limited by your imagination, all the games that you want to play. And the cool thing is that we can make additional decks to a game like this. So we have this template. So we can use language in the kitchen. We could do like body parts, bathing and bandages, gardening and gathering, hunting and fishing. So you can have all this language in this nice little package that a parent, a grandparent, kids can just pick up and start hearing and playing the language. And yeah, maybe in the breakout sessions we can get in if you have questions a little bit more on that stuff. But let me get off of this screen share. Yeah, and sure. And so I'll show another video here. And again, this is just like a strategy of how do I use language in the house. And so if you have kids or grandkids and they're like mine, they really love YouTube, they love cartoons, they love all this stuff. So I'm going to show 2 videos here. So the first one will be of my youngest in the back seat of my car. So since we're short on time, I won't go through that whole video, and I'll just let you know he continues to sing Old MacDonald. But so that's a song that he's heard so many times, and I thought, I think that we could do something a little better than that. And I decided to try my hand at some animation. And let me get that screen up for you here. And if I can do this, anybody can do it. And YouTube was my friend along the way in helping me learn how to do this. But here's another little kind of in the home activity that we worked on as a family.
Yamadima to Badavati. Koe Tana Pamukwiso Makayo na koe with a wire na koe Skasquayo na koe on a wire na koe Pasco koe Niswat koea Na hoa koea Nawakoeak. Nanawakoeak.
On it. So I just wanted to kind of share that. Hopefully there's some your interest. Come to the breakout sessions if you want to learn more about it or if you're interested in that stuff. One of the things I think like with collaborating that, like, oh, all the work is already done for that stuff. And it'd be really easy to plug in another language and have those learning tools available in your community. But Gatna Newe Mawe and Josak, Mawanit, Micheme Om.